and on Facebook. We are here for our second free public lecture from CariGenetics, and today we're diving into a kind of uncomfortable topic, I think. What is happening with your DNA data? Hopefully you guys haven't done 23andMe and your data's already going. But that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm really excited to have our guest speaker all the way from Aberdeen, Scotland, the CEO of Genomes.io, Aldo de Pape. Yeah. And I'm going to invite him now so he can give us his exciting talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karika. Thank you very much to all of you for coming through the live stream and here in person. We're going to have a few more people coming in, but we're not going to let it disturb us because we appreciate your time. .io, and I would like this to be a discussion more than me, like one street of information, like one stream of information. So I have some slides, but those slides are merely to explain to you kind of our thinking, but I would like to hear as much from you as I hope you will hear from me. Let me very quickly introduce to you a little bit about our vision and mission. So, you know, I'm going to go to the very first basics of DNA. And another word for DNA is your genome, right? So your genomic data. Now, and I just heard a conversation here as well about genetic data and all that genetic data can tell you. And we're at a very exciting phase in the evolution of the genomic market and the genomic sector, because increasingly this list of what your DNA can tell you is getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. To give you an example, our infrastructure, Genomes.io, has, well, very soon we'll have active more than 500 reports whereby we read your genetic information so you can find out more about you, right? Now, I'm going to take you back to the year 2000, when the first human genome was sequenced. The cost for doing that at the time was $5 billion. Right? So that is a very big amount. Hi guys, take a seat. So that is a very large amount to sequence a human genome. Now, 23 years later, the cost of that is a little over $500 for basically the exact same setup. The human genome at a clinical grade. That's what we call it, the clinical grade. So you can imagine, with the cost falling from $5 billion to $500, that the value isn't any longer in the sequencing, in the act of bringing it to a laboratory and sequencing it, but the value is in the data and what the data can tell us. A little personal story here, because this beautiful young lady so happens to be my daughter Nora. She's now 3 years old, so this is a picture from the old days. But when my wife was pregnant, we went to Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And we were 20 weeks pregnant, or she was pregnant. She hates when I say we. She was pregnant. When we were expecting, that's what I say. So when we were expecting, we went to the hospital for a test to see if the baby was healthy. And in order to do that, you need to kind of use the DNA. So the nurse at the time asked me, "Are you okay with donating the DNA to charity?" Now, little did she know that I was involved with Genomes.io, so my answer was no. Well, no, my answer wasn't immediately no. My answer was, "Can you tell me which charity?" And she couldn't tell me. And she looked a little bit at me like, "Well, you know, you're a bit of a party pooper. Like, I told you it's for charity, so why wouldn't you want to donate it? And, you know, you're in a hospital, so there's a natural authority there, like that you say, well, you know, what if I say no? Like, you know, could you tell me more about the charity? What happens with the charity? To which database is it going?" All these questions couldn't be answered. And the reason for that is, I'm going to need Tiago, I think. Let me see what's happening here. The reason for that is that at this moment, we're a little bit at the kind of crossroads of us not necessarily being sure yet about genetic data. For a lot of people, it's still a little bit of an unknown, right? It's still a little bit like, oh, I didn't know my DNA could tell me this, or my DNA could tell me that, or that, or that, or that. And 3 years ago, that was even more unknown. Now, I'm telling you that in 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years' time, it's going to be very common. And it's actually going to be as common as your phone number, or your home address, or your credit card number, right? So we basically want to create a little bit of a paradigm shift in thinking about genetic data. Genetic data is yours. It's as relevant as your home address, as your credit card number, as your phone number. It's information that makes you you. And I would actually like to go one step further. Your genome is the biological blueprint to who you are, right? There's only one. You will, in your entire lifetime, you will only have one, right? You will have multiple home addresses, multiple phone numbers, but you will only have one genomic sequence, right? And what we also know is that, as I said before, it is personally identifiable, it is highly sensitive, and it is increasingly valuable. And to give you an idea about market size, the genomic market currently is assessed at 24.6 billion, forecasted to grow with 16.4% compound annual growth rate until 2030. So the growth of this market is ginormous. There is so much to do and so much to evolve in the genomic market. And a lot of people are aware, so there are lots of players. And that makes your data an even more valuable, more sensitive piece of information, right? And that, if anything, if you walk out of here and say, well, that guy from Scotland, he can talk whatever, that's fine. You know, you don't need to agree with us, but I want you to understand one thing, that your genome is worth something. So don't just wave it away like it is nothing, because it is worth something, and you don't want it to come back to you in a way that you don't want. You want to remain in control over it. You want to know where it goes at minimum, as you would want to know with your credit card information, your home address, your phone number, and whatever more, right? That is what I'm basically here to say. So, going back to that question, who do you want to be in control of your most sensitive and valuable piece of information? So let me ask, who would you like to be in control of this piece of information? Me. Yes, there's the answer. You want to be in control of the most valuable piece of information you will ever have. Of course, you want to be in information with that. And that's why I'm proud to be a part of Genomes, because we're the world's largest user-owned genomic database. We basically give you the data. The data is yours. We sequence it, and give it back to you. The data is yours. And I'll get into the intricacies of the technology later. Let's first go to this little piece of information. Did you know that a lot of DNA companies are making money from your data? And funnily enough, we saw a little article in the Royal Gazette announcing this lecture. Big thank you to the team of the Royal Gazette, by the way. And then, funnily enough, below I saw an ad of a DNA company, and it was like a CSI Miami spin for your DNA. So I was like, okay, let's click on this, let's see what it is. And it kind of made the thriller version of your DNA. Like, did you know that, here's how the FBI uses it, and isn't it exciting that you want to be a part of it, and here's where you can sequence it, and whatever more. That is an example of a DNA company. Now, there are also other bigger direct-to-consumer DNA companies. The most notable ones in this market are companies like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, but I can assure you there are far, far, far more than those. They don't necessarily have to have that shape. There are companies out there that will promise you that they can tell you whether you have it in you to become a professional athlete. Or there are companies that do it only for allergies. all the paternity test companies, so the DNA, those are all DNA companies, right? So all of them have a business model whereby they can make money from your DNA, right? All of them might have stipulated that they can keep your data, right? Once you've sequenced it, once you've given them that saliva swab, they can work with your data and they can keep it and they can cross-sell it, right? That is something that I want you to be aware of. They're not doing anything illegal, right? They have told you, it's in their terms and conditions, it's just in the very, very, very fine print, right? So, a little warning or a little kind of advice, if you want to be in control, as you said, make sure you read the fine print. Make sure you understand of what happens with your data. If the company doesn't tell you anything of what they're doing with the data, don't engage with them. They are required to tell you what they're going to do with the data, right? And I'm happy to say that by law, because in Europe you have GDPR, I heard from Tariq we're going to have PIPA, which is a law here, whereby you are required. You can't just use people's data and cross-sell them, but at this moment you're not protected of that. So the companies can say, well, I can use the data, I'm cross-selling the data. And when I say cross-sell, I don't just mean small change, right? I mean hundreds of millions of dollars. And what we do as an organization as well, we keep track of the deals. So 500 million, 60 million, 60 million, 300 million, 400 million, 200 million, $4.7 billion. That's Ancestry.com selling to Blackstone, one of the biggest private equity companies in the world. And Ancestry, so it's genetic ancestry data. Blackstone isn't buying that data to find out that you have ancestors in Ireland, right? They don't care about that. They care about your genome, and that's what creates this massive, massive value of that company, right? Now, there's more to it. It's not only, of course, the sales of the data, but there's also things like breaches and hacks, because people know that this is a rapidly evolving market, that there's money to be made. So, of course, you have pirates out there, cyber pirates, who will try to hack databases, who will try to get into this. So many of these companies have dealt with people trying to hack the database, and in some cases, unfortunately, they've been successful trying to cross-sell the data. So there's a rush on this data. And then you have things which is a little bit more the CSI Miami tour, whereby for criminal investigations people can use DNA data. Now, granted, it's a good thing, right? You want, if there's a killer and they can find it on the basis of DNA, you want them to find out. You want them to find out who did it, and if they use the DNA, then so be it, right? But we were having that discussion earlier. It doesn't happen often. It's not every day, of course, that thankfully that there's a killer on the road. So it's not, that shouldn't preclude the fact that you as a data owner shouldn't be cautious of what happens with your data, right? I'll get into that a little later. So why, to our idea, we feel that the current model doesn't work. So you have the individual patients and data owners who basically lose control over their data, but they also lose their privacy. As I said before, it's the most personal piece of information you will ever have. There's also such a thing that some of the companies have said, don't worry, we will anonymize your DNA. You can't anonymize DNA, right? That doesn't exist. Even what they mean is, we've taken your name off. We've taken your name off the sequence, so if someone gets it, they won't immediately know that it's you. But it only takes a little bit more investigation, just taking it to a next step, to find out that it's actually you. It isn't that difficult. You can do matching with other databases. You can hack. There are loads of things that you can find out that it's actually your data. So if people say, I'm taking your name off it, that doesn't mean anonymizing it. Another thing is, you're not paid for sharing your data. So the hundreds of millions and the 60 million and all the amounts that I mentioned before, none of that money ever went back to the individuals who actually gave the data in the first place, right? So some people feel a little bit like, well, hello, I don't need to be a millionaire off this, but if you're cross-selling my data, where's my piece of the pie in this, right? Which is a normal question, right? And then the other end is the people that buy the data, right? So they are actually, and we've had many conversations with them, they're actually not always happy with the fact that they need to go through a middleman to purchase the data. So they feel it's a poor DNA data acquisition model. They engage with it because it's the only one that's out there, right? The pharma company also takes on a big liability with taking on loads of data. And for instance, in California, the laws have recently changed. The company 23andMe had to let go of loads of people because California became more stringent on these privacy laws, right? Loads of people said, like, hold on, I don't want this anymore. So the law changed. So the liabilities for these companies changed as well. I'm not really sure what's happening here. And we're back. Sorry about that. And then last but not least, and I think this is also a very important thing, because the data changes hands through a middleman, these organizations are not able to do any further enrichment of genomic data. Now, genomic data for these companies is a little bit like if you get oil from the ground. It's highly valuable, but there's still loads of processing that needs to be done once you get it, right? So the way these companies want it is like the more information they have, you call that phenotypic data, of and around the data, the more valuable it is for them, working on it for research purposes, right? So who's the winner in this formula? As I said before, the middleman, right? And we actually say, why don't we change that? Why don't we make the winners here the two organizations who actually engage with each other directly? So what we do with our infrastructure is we make you the owner, you maintain your privacy, you maintain control, you get paid for any research if it's done for commercial purposes. If there's a profit share, then you will be a part of it. Where at the same time, pharma, biotech, and research are happier to work with you. It's a better DNA acquisition model. They don't take on the liability because the ownership remains with you. There's an advanced ability to work with vault holders to enrich the research data. And it is also providing these organizations with a direct way to monetize on their data. That's specifically for biotech companies. Because these companies as well, they know they have a treasure of data that, again, other organizations can use, right? So, and that is why this formula is, to our idea, but yeah, I'm not objective as CEO of the company. That's why we feel this is a better formula. So we are on a mission to make the genomics market more transparent and above all more equitable. And that's what we are all about. So Genomes is effectively a decentralized infrastructure of vaults, if you will, that allows individual patients and users to work with their DNA data however they please. We sequence your data and we put it into a vault and we will give you the keys to the vault. It's similar to a bank account, right? The money on that account is yours. We, not at any point, are able to break open that account and say the data is ours, right? Technologically, we're not able, right? It's not because we promise that to you, it's not because we say we won't do it. No, technologically, and this is where Web3 comes in. I don't know if you've ever heard of Web3 or blockchain comes in. It's an entire decentralized setup whereby the technology by default is trustless, right? So trustless means that the infrastructure is as such that you cannot break it open by default. Are you okay to do questions later at the very end? Yeah, sorry, because then I get through it. But I appreciate it, so please write it down so we can get back to it later. I'm not going to go too far into detail. Maybe we should leave that for questions. What I am going to boast about is that we won a big prize from Deloitte. We won the Technology TechFast 50 Award in 2022 for our application of Web3 in healthcare, because they really like the idea of making it equitable for all stakeholders involved when it comes to working with genomic data. Here's a screenshot of our technology, and I can revisit that when we get to the questions. So we have blockchain technology whereby we work with Consensus. Consensus is the biggest blockchain company in the world, and then for our encryption of data, we work with AMD. Now AMD is the biggest hardware company in the world. They're the Microsoft of hardware. It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and we're very proud that we're able to call ourselves a partner of AMD on this specific level. So we use their encryption technology, which is called SEVES, and we apply that to our infrastructure of vaults. And here's a little bit of an idea of how it works for you as an individual. As I said before, we have 500 reports working, so it's on your. You can consult it like you consult your bank account on the phone. You have a little dashboard, and from that dashboard, we will talk to you about your genome. We give you ideas, telling you more about you, but we also inform you about new queries that are out there. People who might want to work with your data, as well as the financial reward that they will offer you. There are surveys out there of other organizations who would like to survey your data to get a wither reward, so money that you can make for it. But at all times you can say, no, I don't want to participate in this, right? It is up to you whether you want to, yes or no. The point being is you need to give your consent, very important. And second of all, you will get paid once your data gets used. So you will become a beneficiary of all this querying and people using your data. And then why we're here, and for that, first of all, a big thank you to CariGenetics for hosting us, because we don't only work with individuals, we also work with organizations, because this entire idea of vaulting data and making sure that it's done in an equitable way and transparent way can be applied more direct to research purposes, hospitals, universities, loads of people who basically want to work with data at scale. And we do that through something that we would like to call virtual laboratories that we set up on our infrastructure. The virtual laboratory is basically an extended vault. So it's multiple vaults in one laboratory designed for a specific research purpose that we've put out there, right? And this research purpose, by the way, and here's where I think there's a lot to be said for the equitability of research, should at all times be beneficiary to the data owner. And when I say data owner, I don't only mean the individual as a human being, I mean for every living organism. And here's where I think Bermuda has a unique position, because Bermuda has a tremendous biodiversity, right? Now, I'm not telling you anything new, that people from all over the world come to Bermuda to query its biodiversity, to look at life here and sequence also the data of your national bird, of your coral reef, of the queen conch, of all life that is here. Now, what happens often, sadly, is that people, they come and take the data and they are gone, never to be seen, right? So the data leaves Bermuda, right? And that's unfortunate, because you are no longer a beneficiary. Bermuda as a whole is no longer a beneficiary of what happens with the data. They also don't get feedback of where the data goes after that. They don't get feedback on what, on what's built up from the research, because as you are aware, the research is ever evolving. Have you ever read the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? Mm-hmm. Right? So this is a story of a lady who had cancer cells, and after she passed, her cancer cells were used by Johns Hopkins because they were ever growing, right? But her family was not aware until I think 50 years after that actually her cells were being used for these purposes. They meant, it had done tremendous goods, but no one ever bothered to go back to the family, a poor family in Baltimore, to say, well, actually, we're using the data of your grandmother here for this research. It is your data, right? So, let alone the financial elements of it, what about the transparency, right? So, and this is, I think this is a clear case whereby if we work with the infrastructure correctly, not only as individuals, but also for research purposes, not only for human beings, but for every living organism, then we are doing it generally in the most equitable and transparent way possible. I'm going to introduce you to the team, who they all say hi, by the way. They're very, very, very sad they couldn't be here. I was the lucky guy who got to travel to Bermuda. So thank you yeah, very much. So we are a team of academics. My co-founder, he's the geneticist. I'm the venture builder. And then we have a team of people who know technology and that can build an infrastructure. And I'm just very excited to be here. I'm very grateful to the people of CariGenetics who are an ally in working with genomic data in the most equitable and transparent way possible. And Karika, thank you very much for having us over, and thank you very much for giving us platform here. I'm looking forward to a very fruitful collaboration further down. I've done enough talking now. Sorry for over talking. I'm going to go and ask you a question. What does data equity mean for you?
Not data equity, but I have a question, because I remember how you're like, it's, I hate to sound like this is kind of like an elevator pitch. So about the company, if you lose control of the company, will your agreements be grandfathered in black and white and they're immutable?
So the company, so the idea of the technology is decentralized, right? So the setup of the technology is made as such that you cannot, the immutability is in the technology. The immutability is not in the corporate contracts. So a merger or an acquisition. So currently, let me give you an example. If you talk about, you all know a social media platform. Let's take as an example Facebook, right? Facebook, the data lands into a database. The database is basically a central. Let's describe it as an Excel, for lack of a better word, right? So Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, promises you, I'm not going to do anything with the data. And here are policies, but that's a contract. And a contract at the end of the day is a promise. Okay. Right? Our technology, and this is where Web3, this is why people are excited about the technology, is that you cannot open it. It's a ledger, it's a vault in and of itself that can only be opened if you give permission for it. There's no other way.
So
there is a risk.
I constantly maintain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a risk here, because if you lose the keys.
Yeah, that's my cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you need to be aware that that's the risk. But the upside is the data is yours. And only when you want to engage with someone can open it, right? So the owners, so we are the current owners, they can open this, right? Even if they would want, even though I would say tomorrow, I've changed my mind, open it all, then might even, no, you can't, right? Of course I won't say that, but also not the next owner, or the next owner, or the next owner. And that's what we call trustless system. That's what Web3 means, is trustless. And it's not only with genomic data, it's with any type of data. If you look at other players out there, they do that as well. They apply that as well. They say, you are in charge. Like, you are in charge of, what you want to see on TV. That's why Netflix is such a success, right? Because you are in charge of what you want. You are going to be in charge of your data. And that's where Web3 comes in. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
All right. So you were talking about ethics, and you started your presentation, right, just expressing that it's important for us to really understand that our genome is ours, and that we should maintain a system which allows you to engage with other people who are interested in utilizing your genetic data.
If you want to.
If you wish.
Yeah.
So my question will be, right, beyond the money associated with that exchange, what is the value of me sharing my genome with somebody else? And then the second part is like, so what is the value to them of having, because I'm sure thousands of years ago you weren't talking about each other's genome. We got along with like So what now is the value on both hands, you know?
Yeah.
For me and for the research institute or company.
Yeah. So for the research institute or the company, so the pharmaceutical company, and it's a very good question, and I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. So there's something in the development of medication which is called precision medicine. And why it's so important, why your genomic data is so important here, is because the medication as it evolves will be designed as such so that it specifically helps you, right? So whereas now basically we say, okay, we all know that an aspirin will help us with headache, right? They're going to give you a personal advice once they have your genome. So they're going to say, you need half an aspirin, not two. I'm making a very basic, this is a very basic example. It's far more advanced than that. So, and because, pharmaceutical companies have their ways of further developing this, and also their science and technology is accelerating as well, they can really bring your genome in the mix, which makes it so valuable, right? And this also has to do with, for instance, where CariGenetics comes in with so if you look at the global genomic databases right now, I think over 90% is either people from the United States or from Northwestern Europe, right? So representation of the Caribbean or representation of many countries in Africa, in Asia, that's still a very big unknown. So, but that also is an indicator that is a very big untapped market for these companies. And these companies say, well, hey, we want to kind of bring our medication to this market, but for that, we need to understand who lives there. So that is why the genomic data is so important, right? So it's for the development of precision medicine, for finding right cures, that they can use your genomic data. That's why it's so important. Why we didn't talk about it 1,000 years ago is because we didn't make that relation yet, right? We didn't know that it was our gene that could give us that information. Now we know, since the year 2000, we know, like, hold on, we can get a lot of information from this, and this is only getting more and more and more and more and more. So we're onto something. That is why this market is so booming. Then to your question about why would I want to, you're very right, you don't have to, right? So there are people that want to work with us, they say, listen, I want to vault, and then I want you to leave me alone. And you tell me as soon as I can, because it's a big data file, so you can't have it on your hard drive at home on your laptop because your laptop will break. So, but you tell me once, in 5 years, once we're able to do that, then I'm going to vault it in my house, have it on my own server, and everyone can leave me alone. All right? And we respect that. You can respect it for that privacy element, say, no one will touch my genomic data. That is fine. That can be done through us. Other people say, hey, we like the fact that you have 500 reports on the infrastructure that could teach me more about me. I'm curious about me. This is also the success of Ancestry.com and 23andMe. That's where they started. People were curious about their genetic ancestry. They say, oh, it's quirky, it's fun. It's like, oh, I didn't know this. This is nice. I'm learning more about myself. This is the success of these companies. We also have these reports. It makes it more vibrant. The information is only shared with you. It's not shared with anyone else. Those reports are yours, right? So that could be a reason. And then thirdly, the commercial element. So you can gain interest, or you can gain financial rewards by having your data out there if you want to participate with further commercial query, right? So those three elements are there. The privacy, then more information for you, about you, and thirdly, the financial element.
Can I add to that as well?
Yeah.
So as Aldo said, at the minute, the reference genome, and that is the genome whenever any genetic test is done, that's compared to, is European. So all of us in the room that are not European, that's not representative of us. There was a study done in 2018 that showed that those of African descent, I think they've done about 1,000 people, had 10% more genetic information than the reference. Now the reference had 3 billion data points. That meant we had 300 million additional data points just because you are African descent. So you can't compare apples and oranges. That's what we're doing right now. If you have a diagnostic test, if someone gets cancer, the first thing or the best thing that should happen is that they get tested genetically to say, what was my risk of cancer, so I can let my family know what their risk of cancer is. Or take the tumor and genetically test it, because we need to know what other mutations in the tumor, because it's genetically different, so we can give it the right drug. All of that right now is European. So all of us in this room is not designed for us.
That's what I was just going to say.
That's the problem. And that's why I created this one.
Pointing at me.
Not everyone in the room.
That's all. But you know, it's not for us right now, and so it's not for us because we haven't gotten involved. We've been misused. Story of Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
They never gave consent.
So what is the dark side of this information? So it's like, yes, this is all great, share all this and stuff like this, all your information goes out into the world, but you know, at some point somebody can turn this into a dark side.
Yeah, so the dark side, and this is always the doom and gloom part, and people look at me like, oh, this is conspiracy theory. You could get deported on the basis of, you know, when people read your genomic data. You could be denied insurance policies because you are more susceptible to, for instance, heart disease, you know, than someone else, than the standard, right? You could be denied employment because the other candidate has a better genetic profile than you, right? Now, all three examples are not big brotherly stories. We found kind of examples, real life examples of them already in the recent past, whereby this has happened, right? It's not mainstream yet, so not by a long shot. But if this data becomes mainstream, if the data becomes very accessible and very easy to get to, and you haven't watched where your data is, people could feed it back to you. They could say, well, hold on, I've seen you participate in this research, so we have your genomic data. You know, your employer already, you know, they already look at your Facebook page, right? So they already look. If you misbehave on social media, you might, you know, your employee might call you and say, well, hey, so what prevents them from doing that, you know, not doing that with your genomic data further into the future? Right now, it's still an abstract thing, and I appreciate that you say, well, hold on, it's, you know, it's complicated, it's like this and this and this and that. But think about 5 years from now, right? If you know that in 2000, that's only 23 years ago, this was done for the very first time, how rapidly this is accelerating. This will become very mainstream, right? It will be like a picture in your iPhone, it will be your genome, and it will be, you know, so you need to kind of now make the steps to control it, to make sure that it doesn't end up somewhere that you don't want it to end up. So you know, you control the narrative, or you know at least what you're talking about.
So what if you've already done 23andMe or Ancestry.com?
Yeah.
You're gone.
Yeah. No, let me put in a little caveat here, because I don't just want to demonize 23. Sorry.
It's going already. That's to say it's true.
Yeah.
And that's why personally I said I'm not doing it
Yeah.
until I do my company and I know it's safe.
Yeah.
But if you have done it, then there is a way you can still use the platform, but sadly it is out there, so you
Yeah.
can't get it back.
Yes, but okay, so I don't want to over demonize 23andMe and Ancestry.com, right? Because they, you know, these are also good people that started the company, you know, way back when this technology wasn't there, right? So they can get away with the excuse like, listen, technology wasn't there, so we did it this way. This was the best way we knew how, right? These companies also have good contracts and everything in place, and I'm sure that if you read the fine print, it will be written somewhere that they won't abuse it, like they, you know. So, and that is also more important. Also, as a warning to all of you, many of these companies, if they're good companies, they have a policy in place whereby they will give the file back to you. That's often a VCF file. right? So 23andMe is Ancestry.com, they generate a VCF file and they give that file back to you. It's in your account. So at all times you can reclaim it. That is then your genomic data, and you can close your account. So you can stop further engaging with them and get your data back in the process. And actually every good DNA company should have such a policy in place. If they don't have that policy in place, you should get out there.
So at the moment, right? Like who can get access to your DNA? So, just take the average person. Like, is it when you go to the dentist? Is it, when you donate blood? Is it every time you show up in the hospital or doctor?
No,
like, who can get your DNA?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of, people can't, by law, sequence your DNA if you go somewhere and you don't know that's what you're coming there for, right? So I mean, this is again the CSI part, whereby if they find something and then on the basis of what they find, they can sequence your DNA. Yes, they could. In theory, they could for forensic purposes. Right. But it's not that your dentist is like, haha, I'm going to sequence your DNA today. Let me very cleverly get your saliva and then sell that on, right? In theory, yes, but he will be, he or she will be in a lot of trouble if it happens. There was a case, and that's a scary case, with all these COVID tests ongoing in the United Kingdom. There was a company that had done a lot of COVID tests and then thought, you know what, it's another clever business model from all these tests that we have. Why don't we use it to sequence the genomes? And they were government approved. And thank goodness for journalism at that point, because we had the Sunday Telegraph, and they found out, like, hold on, what you're doing here is a massive breach of privacy, and you should be thrown in jail for this, right? This is a kind of, this is an atrocious example, and fortunately, this is not the main practice of 99.9% of companies in the world, right? Right now, it is as such that if a company says we're going to do something with your DNA, that's what they're going to do, and that is when we want you to be cautious.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I can speak to Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
No one's doing it. First of all, we don't have the capacity to do it. That's the first thing. But we have an ethics protocol or process. I've been in for a year now. So it takes a while to even get the approval to even say we're going to approach you as the public to recruit you into the study. So there is a process. Any study that involves any humans has to go through the ethics committee before any action is taken. That's the first thing. I have experienced this COVID question. As everyone probably knows in the room, I was in charge of all the COVID testing in the country, and that was a concern of parents when we were getting into the schools. Was, are you going to take my saliva from my child and sequence it? And my response was, we don't even know if your child's a boy or a girl. We just know if they have COVID or not. That's it. That's all we're looking at. You have to have informed consent before you do anything of that sort. And if you don't have it, you can't do anything. So that is a barrier in place, and that's because of the Henrietta Lacks and Tuskegee and those types of things. When they came out, there was like very strict rules that were put in place for that. So no, the dentist isn't taking your saliva and sequencing it.
This is fascinating. So I'm the elephant in the room. I'm a physician practicing in the States 20 years COVID. I decided to come back and look at healthcare in Bermuda. Thanks for everything you've done. Thanks for what you're doing. But the questions you guys are asking are right on point. What I tell people, just today I said, in fact, time I come to this lecture, but Bermudians are very private people. We're the second most isolated place in the world, but like you mentioned, we've got more biodiversity than most anywhere else. So we're like the microcosm of the entire world, right? If you look at our history, we're the microcosm of the entire world. Plus, you brought up the biodiversity of our island, whether it's in the sea or land. So 400 years ago, we are the original pirates. Give you guys a history. I've been all over the world and sourced stuff from all over the world to bring it to Bermuda in case the whole world blew up. We're the only place that will survive. Yeah. You understand? Yeah. So people are fascinated. I've talked to biologists when they come visit here. It's like, what can you tell me what you've noticed in Bermuda? They say, well, you got stuff from that should be in tropical places. We got stuff in the sea you wouldn't fly anywhere else in the world, right? We got the longtail that comes here. We got the whales that come around. It's ridiculous, right? So as a physician, what I tell people is we have to understand as Bermudians, we're in I call it exciting and scary at the same time, that we could make a big difference for the entire planet if we do things the right way. And doing things the right way would be if we decide to go the route as far as getting into looking at genetics and the makeup of genetics. It's got to be very tight, and the best way to do it is decentralized. Okay, so the world's going toward what we call decentralization, where you have control. So the word I use, your DNA is more private than your private. You get that, right? Right? It's a little joke, but you know, to make it so the average person understands. And so you have to be very careful. Anything you're signing on to, it's got to be thought. And I'm working on setting up a platform in Bermuda from the healthcare side as a physician to make people know. It's like when you come to a physician, that's very confidential, very private.
Yeah.
When you get stuck getting into DNA and looking into detail about your risk for stuff, it's got to be where it's a pure understanding what that means. So you brought up points about precision medicine and all, but this is the caveat. The studies are showing that your DNA puts you at risk for certain things, but more than anything else, it's other things that go on in your environment that shape. It's like turning on switches, right? COVID exposed that to people, right? So you guys have to understand what they're saying, and sort of question everything. Everything people present, question it, and say, does it make sense to me personally as an individual? And that's the way the world's going. But like say, you could sort of check off stuff to make sure it's a clear understanding before you sign on anything when it's to do with your health. That's that's a summary.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up as well. And the word decentralized is, so we are, if people look at us, then they say, okay, you are in science, but they call us a decentralized science tool. And there's a big movement which is called DeSci, which is the abbreviation, decentralized science, that is getting traction on Twitter as well, whereby they say anything that happens with data should be the individual patient deciding. So that's again the word decentralized coming back. So we are a decentralized infrastructure. But thank you. It's very enlightening.
Well, they're pretty together.
As we know with COVID, they threw in that word under the Emergency Measures Act. Then all rules are thrown out the room. How would that come into play if they say, well, we need all this data to help with the new pandemic that's in, so your company has to give this up or something like that?
Yeah.
How would that then work?
Well, we would tell them again, going to the question of not being able to break it open, said you can work with us, but you need the consent of everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to send a message to everyone saying, are you okay to share this data in this emergency scenario, right? That would be our answer. And if the government says, well, no, we need something else, then they should go somewhere else, right? But we would say this is the only way to do it. We've built something called a repeat consent protocol, which works on our infrastructure, whereby for every piece of research, for every time your data is queried, the individual needs to give consent, explicit consent. Click yes here if you want to do this, yes or no.
And that would be an itemized detail of what your DNA will be used for
Correct.
at that particular time.
Correct. Yeah. And if there's a financial reward for it, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. Yeah.
So I give you an example. Not everybody got tested. Bermuda, we didn't say every single human on Bermuda you have to get tested, right? You follow me? It wasn't like they could afford, in certain situations, you had people flying into the island, you had to get tested. But it's not like everybody on the island was tested during the pandemic. It's 3 years now. Right? So you have to know about what it means to be private, right?
Yeah.
You guys have to know between private and public. So if you want to be traveling and stuff, they didn't give you a choice, right? I was in and out, with my kids are in America with my wife, so I just say, okay, bite the and I test to get in and out.
Yeah.
Get into the States, also coming back, okay, yes, that's good. But But if I didn't want to do that, I could sit up in Bermuda like my father, who's in his 80s, and say, you're not traveling for the next few years. This is a pandemic, but you gotta do this, this, and this. But guess what? You don't have to get tested all the time. I was the guinea pig. Even for my family in the States, I have young kids, and kids, they didn't get vaccinated because I wanted to prove, as far as understanding genetics, pandemics, and stuff, you have to almost prove both sides, right? Because it's only one truth, as you know, when it comes to science and stuff. So you can't say everybody get vaccinated, because some people, and you brought up the disparity. So he mentioned about equity. So they have social determinants of health. It's what we call social determinants of equity. So I always make the argument, yes, what happens is a lot of biodiversity and there's a lot of history being from people of African descent. But when you look at what happened in the pandemic, it's not like we rushed a bunch of vaccinations to Africa, right? Right. But guess what? Look at the outcomes. So if you look at, I tell people, after the pandemic, you look at the next 5 to 10 years, and you look at what happens. That's going to be fascinating, right? As far as outcomes and stuff, right? So everything you got to take with a grain of salt.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Outside of anything. When the results are sent back to the individuals, is there a form or someone that's available to break down to help the individual understand what's written in their report?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're a startup, so yes, this is the dream, that we would like such a person to be there. And actually, we respect your privacy, so we wouldn't kind of beat you to the punch and kind of have someone give you a call about it. But yes, ideally there should be, a desk of experts who can help you better understand the reports that we generated and that we then present to you. There are also people, again, that say, I don't want to know. Like, there's whether you are a carrier for any rare diseases, so whether you're going to pass on any of these diseases to your children, whether you are susceptible for diseases or something. Sometimes it's a scary notion to know that. So not everyone chooses to know, right? Some people say, like, I don't want to know, I want to live, right? So then you can forgo the fact that that piece of information is there. So we won't push it in your face if you don't want to. Essentially, yeah.
So, just again on the privacy piece, right? So if I'm not necessarily at risk of giving up my genetic data, by going to the grocery store or the doctor or the hospital, and I would prefer to keep my genetic data to myself. And the best way is just not to engage with anybody around it then. Because as soon as I engage, even with your company, in spite of the principles and the systems you put in place, I'm going to be thinking about what if something happens and somebody gets a hold of it. So if I don't engage anybody, nobody has my report, right?
No. Yes, but I mean, it's not only doom and gloom in that sense that people want to do you wrong by getting the data, right? So they want to get a pharmacogenomic understanding. Pharmacogenomic meaning like how is he going to respond to medication or something like that. So they want to see who you are, like in case of an emergency.
Right.
Then so it's for that cause, right? So
right. Yeah. So if I'm interested in the information from my DNA, then fine.
Yeah.
Or if I'm interested in the commercial value of my DNA, then fine. Then I engage. But if I'm not interested in that, then the best way is to just stay out of it, and then I don't have to worry about what somebody's going to be doing with my.
So my co-founder, you raise a very good point. My co-founder says, in our lifetime, everyone will have their genome sequenced, because it's just going to be so easy. So you're right. You need to kind of watch where this is happening. Right? That is because this is evolving so rapidly. The cost is coming down. It's $500, but the biggest, the market leaders in sequencing have already said in a few years we're going to be able to do it for under $100.
Which means you'll be a corner store doing it.
Yeah. So that leads to higher accessibility and people getting it done quicker.
Right. So I'm saying, so basically, where you're coming from, and I'm sure what you're getting into, Karika, is that if you're going to do that, make sure you're engaging with a trusted source.
Yes.
That you're engaging with an organization that has proper systems in place, that has
Correct.
proper protections in place and things, and they don't
Yeah.
just go willy-nilly like, hey, we can walk in there and get our genetic sequences done and come up with a piece of paper and walk down the road, and meanwhile down the back door processing it
Yeah.
with some other company making money
Yeah.
off of it. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
The other side to it is again, what I'll go back to what I was saying earlier.
Right, yeah.
We don't have medicine made for us.
Exactly.
So
exactly, yeah.
it's like the flip side. So you might not want to get involved, but then don't complain when the medicine doesn't work for you.
Right.
Because in this country, we have a drug called Micardis that is prescribed for high blood pressure that many people will probably know. In the package insert, it says this may not work as well for black patients because they know it doesn't work. So we have our population taking this drug to reduce their blood pressure and it's not working
Right. Because it's not based.
because it wasn't based on our genetics.
Right.
So we can take a neutral approach and say, well, I don't want my data out there and let me do nothing, but then when you are the one that needs the help, then we don't have it. We don't have the information. So then that's what we as a people have been. I say we, meaning everyone that's non-European. It's like 85% of the world. We have been in this kind of like neutral state, like, okay, I'm not gonna get involved, I don't trust the system, and medicine is progressing.
And we're the sickest.
And we're the sickest, and we're seeing like, oh, this young child is cured of cancer in England. Yeah, because they have the data.
Well, and the research isn't being directed in those directions either.
They
You
are.
don't have.
They are, but we say no.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So then any research can't be directed towards certain races and cultures.
Right, because there's no data for it. So we come and, they come and say, do you want to get involved? And we say no because we don't trust you, which is, we have every right. Because there's no one that looks like us that's doing it.
Right.
So that's, again, what we're trying to fix. So it's like this vicious cycle that we're in at the minute. And I just don't want us to be left behind when it comes, like you said, we're the sickest.
It's fascinating. I can tell you guys, just in the past year, sickle cell, I mean, we have patients, my aunt had sickle cell. So it's so advanced when you look at, you guys can get into it, but you know what I'm talking about. When you look at the genome and we could manipulate it, right, for different diseases. That's how advanced it is. And it's coming, it's not gonna be stopped. So what I don't wanna see is people, we're sort of sitting on the sidelines and we're left out as a population saying, well, how come we're still suffering from stuff, cancer, certain disease, and everybody else is getting the right treatment, and they're thriving. Right? And like that, so as African Americans, so I say as Bermudians, as people thriving, and that's a debilitating illness, right? So when you hear stories like that, you see if the opportunities available for health and treating illnesses, right? So you can't, some people can say, well, I'm gonna go, my dad's 80, he's in the, what they call the departure lounge, which means he don't care what happens at this point. Okay, just, yeah. But other people, young people, you want to have people have the opportunity to live a good, healthy life to the best of their abilities based on the research and the available treatment, right?
If I'm being honest, personally,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of cancer in my family. I'm on the fence because I want to know, but I also don't want to know. But I'm like, I need to know, but I would rather know and know that I can actually help cure it. So it's a similar thing that happened with COVID. Like, people say, I'm not getting any tests because then I'm not going to work and then I'm going to lose pay and I'd rather not know. We can't do that anymore. Like with all other diseases, we can't pretend like it's not happening because it's gonna get us. And we complain our healthcare costs is going up and up and up. It's because we're just compounding all the problems on top of each other. We're not treating it, and so we have to do something. So it is a personal call. You have to make that. You have to be convicted, and there's no one forcing you. But it's just okay if you're not going to get involved. You can on the other side complain that we don't have for us.
No, understood. I was just seeking clarity on that point, and I guess fortunately, I tend to be a type of rare type of species, right? So I don't think what I do is going to influence the masses.
Never know.
I have a question.
Sure.
In Bermuda, we have a prevalence of certain diseases. Okay, I'm hearing that heart disease obesity, all of these things are going. I'm also seeing a lot of, among my seniors, we used to call it dementia, but now the word is Alzheimer's. And we're seeing hereditary traits in families where in reality it's going right through the family. Are you in a position now to be able to have people to know, are they predisposed to being an Alzheimer's patient?
So I'm not a researcher on this, but we partner who are in the development of or have already developed such reports, right? So we will have, so we had so we're talking to the, I think American Alzheimer's Society, who wants to do such research. I'm not, I don't want to be as pretentious to say that I know anything about kind of how advanced they are with that research, but we are in conversation with them to better understand the genetic connections that can be made between that disease and your genome, right? And we will be on the lookout to further develop these reports, right? The report format of these things, as this information becomes more mainstream, these report templates, if you will also become mainstream, right? So if we don't develop it, we might have another partner out there that, and you call that an API, so that through their interface can communicate with our infrastructure. So we then present it to you as like, here's a survey or a research of the American Alzheimer's Society. Do you want to collaborate with them? Because here's what it could tell you. And that could lead to the question you have.
Is that again, and is this still happening again with the European
Yes.
white? And so we have very little knowledge of what's happening in black families, but we're
Yeah.
seeing a prevalence of it here in Bermuda among black families, probably white families too, but I don't know. But, and so are you basically saying that even this kind of research is not going to be as applicable because we still don't have the data?
No, so
So for their side, yes, but that's what we're for. So we're working together. So we're the research partner, where we will have a research study that's on our list. Actually, is Alzheimer's in Bermuda, because that is a question that I keep getting asked. It is very, very apparent that there is some genetic link. So that would be what we would do after we've done the research with everyone who has given informed consent from Bermuda. Then we can then have a report that can be Alzheimer's prediction in Bermuda. That can then be added to such reports. But until we do the research, we just don't know. There's a lot of studies that have never been done in our population.
There's also a prevalence of not wanting to know.
Yeah.
And I work with seniors a lot, but not only here but in other countries. But Bermudians, I shouldn't say that, I'm Bermudian by the way. But I find a lot of people who don't want to know. So even there's a prevalence in your family, you've got intelligent, university educated people who say, I don't want to know, I don't want to know that. And I think it's such a shame because they have children, so you don't know what the prevalence will be for generations to come.
Right.
And we're going to face a lot of that. The millions are suspicious, aren't we?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We are a bunch.
And is it from the Tallahassee? I do know that there's a situation with the flyers and all the things they did in America. I'm a Yankee, and I spent so much time there. But we are reluctant. We are. I think when I studied slavery and then came home and discovered that all the stuff in the South was happening in Bermuda. So there is this tendency of feeling that we've already been taken advantage of by white Bermuda. And so we're very, very suspicious and very reluctant.
Yeah.
And you're going to have challenges because of it.
Yes. I mean, I faced it a lot, like I said, with the vaccine. That was the low of my career, to be honest. I had a lot of people that hated me because, I'm just explaining with the RNA vaccine, how it works. But, it's a personal choice. And that was what I kept saying, that you have to be convicted because it's going into your body as far as the vaccine. In this case, it's your data. So we're not going to get everyone. We know that. That's not the plan. The plan is not to get everyone, but we need to get at least some type of cross-section of our people. And this is what we're trying to do at CariGenetics is not just for Bermuda, it's also for the Caribbean. because as you know, the history, like we actually moved around in the Caribbean as well. So we're not like our own little island here. Genetically, we're actually mixed all throughout the region. If we can get 0.01%, not even that, that would even be a plus. 100,000 people throughout the Caribbean. There's 44 million of us. I just need 100,000.
Yeah.
So that we can get the data and actually figure out what's going on. So we don't need everyone, and we're not trying to force anyone to do this. We understand that sometimes you just don't want to know, and that's, we respect that. But we need to do something.
And we hope that with our decentralized infrastructure, setting up such a virtual laboratory, that is initiated by CariGenetics, but whereby each vault owner is an owner, right? It's a user-owned database. You can make the decision, right? So that you remain in control throughout the entire process. The current research cycle doesn't operate like that. Researchers take your data and they shelve it after they're done, right? So the data is shelved and you don't know what happens with it afterwards, right? So it starts to live a life of its own, the data. Because it's now vaulted, you at all times know what's happening with it, which hopefully should help with the suspicion part that you mentioned, let alone also then, the financial rewards that you can gain from it, etc., etc., etc. But it makes it more equitable to do it in such a decentralized way and helps people, to find progress overall.
So it's your intention that all of us plus, I don't know what your plan, I love people who say this is their plan of action, but obviously that's quite a task. And not saying you're not up to it, but it's a massive task. Are you going to do this? And I'm sure that, look at who's here. How are you going to get your point across to make more of us as Bermudians respond to that? I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue with this method? Are you going to go on social media, TV, talk shows?
Just to let you know, I already contacted your company.
Okay. Well, we have, the team is here, all
I
four
already
of us are here.
contacted your company to ask some point questions, gave them my email.
Okay.
Just like say, I know as far as, looking into the future. And you're going to need, all of us, what I tell people, my attitude about Bermuda, the more we work together, the more we accomplish. But it's got to be done the right way. I'm very old school. It's got to be done the right way. You got Bermudians that they're very particular, and deep down inside we're perfectionists. So we want it done the right way, so we could all be proud again of what we achieved, right? So right now the world's under so much stress, and it's a lot of distrust, right? What's happening, not only even before the pandemic. So we have to keep things very tight. And Bermuda, I think it's an opportunity, but it's like everybody's got to work together, and sort of be accountable, right? And we have to be very transparent as far as this is what we're doing. Can you see it? We're building a new garden. Can you see it?
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. We're gonna go out and catch some fish. This is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's gotta be.
I think the alternative you should also consider is that, as I said, the philosophy is that in our lifetime everyone will have their genome sequenced. More DNA companies will find their way into the market, also in Bermuda.
That's right.
So it can be also a very kind of segmented approach, like completely scatter, not getting the research results that are also so much needed. So that's the alternative. So now it's coordinated in a decentralized way versus just being all over the place and the data just being used and abused by whoever wants it, by the highest bidder effectively. So that's the alternative. I don't think the question should be, will your data be sequenced? I think we know that the answer to that will be yes, because it's just going to become so mainstream, right?
Okay, we have one more question and then we'll wrap up. I want to answer your question first. We are going to go from every angle because we know that we can't just keep doing this. Because some people will appreciate this. Some people want to see, like you said, social media ads. We're actually doing a school tour. So we've got some things coming down the pipeline, got campaigns. So we have a lot of different media to reach everyone. We're going to partner with community partners, some of the football clubs, the cricket club. So we're making sure we try to get to everyone. It's going to be it's heavy lifting, but I'm up to it. We're going to get it done. Yes, last question and then we'll finish.
Well, I was just gonna say to that, because I was also gonna answer it. I was gonna say that, you know, at this point, what Karika's done is very nice. This was a nice presentation, you know, and to be honest with you, for me, I didn't know that we were gonna be talking about this in particular, or I had no idea about what CariGenetics plan was before I got it. But I tell you what, right, if a news article goes out, right, that Karika, because this I guess personal, that Karika is trying to collect people's DNA, this room be full. Right? And then you get the opportunity to actually like tell people what you're doing and why.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like, the controversy is what gets people's attention. And then you just have the capacity to ride that and actually explain what you're doing and why and show people how it makes sense. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that will get people's attention. Trust me.
But yeah, I am thankful for everyone that came, and we're grateful for Aldo flying all the way here and for sharing this information. Can we give another round of applause?
Sorry about the weather. Sorry about the weather.
It's a lovely island.
I know she probably sold you one of this beautiful sunshine.
As I said, I'm from Aberdeen, Scotland, so you can have
Oh, it's so beautiful weather.
Have a good
Probably
day,
went to
everyone.
me.
Is he going to be doing other things beyond this while he's here?
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yes.